Welcome back to Social Media and Web Analytics. It's week 2, and before we get started with the video lecture, I thought I'd take a moment and give a kind of high-level overview of the things I expect you guys to work throughout this week, be it video lectures, what we're going to do in class, and how you're going to spend most of your study time. So let's jump in. The video lecture this week is going to take a step back from the notion of social media and web, in the course name, Social Media and Web Analytics, and think deeper about some kind of particular analytical construct, being causality, and trying to understand the differences between correlation between variables and whether that correlation can be interpreted as one of these variables A causing some other outcome B. We're going to think about when we can make causal claims, what additional assumptions might we need. And it turns out there's going to be very particular assumptions you need to make this happen in a linear regression setup. So a lot of this is going to be thinking about running a linear regression. And because that assumption is tough to hold in real world settings, when we just have observational data that we're just kind of absorbing from the real world, what we'll then think about is, can we use experimental variation? So can I, as a firm, potentially go in and run an experiment, or can we find kind of natural experiments to where what's been happening in the real world kind of drops something that looks like an experiment in our labs to kind of set up a linear regression model where we're going to be able to make causal claims. Then we'll think about, how do we do that in R? How do we run that model? What are the different commands we might or may not need to do that? In addition to the video lecture, there's the lab assignment, which I want you guys to be working on in your own time. What the lab assignment is going to do is it's going to take a bit of a step back from kind of running an experiment or interpreting kind of what happens in a natural experiment to make causal claims, and just take a step back and think, suppose we run a linear regression, so y equals x1 beta plus x2 beta 2. How do we interpret the regression coefficients that come out of such a model? And what might the shortcomings be of a set of interim models that we gradually kind of extend? The focus is going to be about price discrimination in an internet-mediated market. And I think it's a really interesting exercise to kind of think, as my model gets more complicated, do I feel more comfortable, thinking that I might have a causal relationship on at least with one of my regression coefficients or one of my X variables? Or no matter how kind of complicated that model gets, am I potentially feeling a little too nervous about that? I know that the linear regression knowledge of people in my class varies a lot. So depending on where you are, there's different kind of refresher notes made available that you can read through on the course website under the week 2 course material to help kind of catch you up or brush up bits and pieces where you might be missing out on like a certain concept. In addition to the lab assignment, we have our weekly lab section where we meet in small groups. This week, we're going to kick off the group presentations. So each lab section is going to have 2 group presentations, which will be about half an hour or so each, which is the presentation and the discussion that comes after it. And then in the remaining 25 or so minutes, what we'll do is we'll look back at the previous week's lab assignment. So that was lab assignment 01 that you were working on in the first week. And we'll pick and choose bits and pieces out of that assignment that we can kind of go over the answers to and kind of have a discussion about if there's any kind of open questions that are left. Finally, there's some other stuff that you might want to be working on. So this week, we're going to make the technical assignment available. So this is one of the big assignments for this class. We'll release it during the week, and we'll also release the groupings, so who's going to be working with who. Have a look at the assignment when it gets released, reach out to your group members, and start to think about how you want to work through this assignment. The material that we cover this week and next week in video lectures is going to be really useful for helping you guys work through that assignment and understanding the key arguments. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, where we get started thinking about correlation versus causation.